Number 10. The Curse of Tamerlane. The year is June 19th, 1941. In the ancient city of Samarkand in Soviet Uzbekistan, a team of Soviet archaeologists under the direction of Mikhail Gerasimov opens the tomb of Timur, known to history as Tamerlane, the 14th century Turco-Mongol conqueror whose campaigns killed an estimated 17 million people, representing roughly 5% of the entire world population at the time. This is a man whose Tower of Skulls outside Delhi contained the remains of 90,000 people. This is a man who, by any historical measure, was the single most destructive individual who ever lived. The tomb had been sealed since Timur's death in 1405, and inside it, on the lid of the inner sarcophagus, was an inscription in Arabic. The inscription read, "Whosoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." The Soviet archaeologists were men of science. They were materialists, operating in a state that had officially abolished superstition. They noted the inscription. They opened the tomb anyway. They removed Timur's remains for study on June 20th, 1941. On June 22nd, 1941, 2 days later, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in the history of human warfare. More than 3 million soldiers crossed into Soviet territory in a single coordinated assault, along a front stretching nearly 3,000 kilometers. Within weeks, the Soviet Union was in its darkest crisis since its founding. By the end of the war, 27 million Soviet citizens were dead. An invader more terrible than Tamerlane. On the scale of casualties inflicted on Soviet territory, this was not metaphor. Now here is what the mainstream account does with this. It notes the date coincidence and moves on. It notes that Operation Barbarossa had been planned for months, that the opening of a tomb in Uzbekistan could not have influenced Hitler's strategic decisions. That correlation is not causation. All of this is true. All of this is also what you would expect the mainstream account to say, because the alternative is a category of explanation that no secular scholarly tradition has a framework for. What the mainstream account does not fully address is this. On November 19, 1942, Stalin ordered Timur's remains returned to Samarkand with full Islamic burial rites. 3 days later, on November 22, 1942, the Soviet counteroffensive at Stalingrad began. Operation Uranus encircled the German Sixth Army in the largest reversal of fortune in the entire Eastern Front campaign. The tide of the war changed. 2 events, 2 dates, 2 reversals. Mikhail Gerasimov, who opened the tomb, later said in interviews that he had not taken the inscription seriously at the time. He did not elaborate on whether he took it seriously afterward. The record does not say. What the record does say is that the inscription was accurate about the direction of events, and that the reversal of those events coincided with the reversal of the act that the inscription warned against. You can call that coincidence. Many historians do. But a coincidence this precise, with this much documentation, occurring at this scale of historical consequence, is the kind of coincidence that keeps historians up at night even when they don't say so in their papers. Number 9. The Curse of Tutankhamun. It is February 1923. Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon have spent a decade and a private fortune finding the most intact royal tomb in the history of Egyptian archaeology. The tomb of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun, sealed since approximately 1323 BCE, has been located in the Valley of the Kings. On February 17, 1923, the sealed inner chamber is opened in front of witnesses.
The popular version of what followed focuses on Lord Carnarvon's death from an infected mosquito bite in April 1923, on the supposed blackout of Cairo at the moment of his death, on the howling of his dog in England at the exact same hour. These details may be embellished. They may be journalistic construction. The British press of 1923 was not above embellishment. What is not embellished is the documented sequence of deaths among people connected to the tomb's opening, a sequence that statistician Dr. Mark Nelson of Monash University analyzed in a peer-reviewed paper published in the British Medical Journal in 2002, attempting to determine whether the so-called mummy's curse was statistically real. Nelson's methodology was careful. He defined two groups: those present at the official opening of the tomb, or the sealed inner chamber, and those who were not present but had other documented connections to the excavation. He then tracked survival times for both groups. His findings were more complicated than either believers or skeptics wanted. When he controlled for age and health at time of exposure, the difference in survival between the exposed and unexposed groups was not statistically significant. The curse, in Nelson's analysis, did not hold up as a population-level effect. But Nelson's paper itself contains a detail that his conclusion somewhat obscures. Among the people most directly involved in the physical opening of the sealed spaces, not just the presence at ceremonies, but the hands-on work of breaking seals and entering first, the death rate in the years immediately following was notably higher than in the broader connected group. The closer to the actual violation of the seal, the worse the outcomes. Lord Carnarvon, who funded the excavation and was present at the opening, died 6 weeks later. Arthur Mace, who helped Carter chisel open the inner wall, developed mysterious exhaustion shortly after the opening and died in 1928, cause undetermined. George J. Gould, an American financier who visited the tomb in 1923, died of pneumonia shortly after. A radiologist named Archibald Reed, who x-rayed the mummy, died suddenly in 1924. Hugh Evelyn White, a scholar who participated in the excavation, died by suicide in 1924 and reportedly left a note attributing his death to the curse. The conventional explanation for these deaths is Aspergillus niger, a toxic mold that grows in enclosed ancient spaces and can cause serious respiratory illness in people with compromised immune systems. This is a real phenomenon. Tomb mold is real. It has killed people. It is a legitimate scientific explanation for some of the deaths associated with Egyptian excavations. What the mold explanation does not explain is why the curse was inscribed in the first place 3,300 years before anyone knew what Aspergillus niger was. How did the people who sealed the tomb know that something inside it would harm those who opened it? How did they know with enough precision to write a warning? What knowledge did they have about the biological properties of sealed ancient spaces that they encoded as a spiritual warning, because they had no scientific vocabulary for it? The curse did not require the supernatural to work. It required biology. But the people who wrote it did not have access to microbiology. They had access to something else. Empirical observation, probably. The accumulated knowledge of watching what happened to people who violated previous sealed spaces, and the decision to encode that observation as the most effective deterrent available to them, a threat from the gods. The Curse of Tutankhamun, in its most honest reading, may be the oldest documented public health warning in human history. Number 8. The Curse of the Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond is 45.52 carats, blue, and currently resting in a display case at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., where it has been since 1958. It is one of the most visited objects in the world. Approximately 8 million people see it every year. None of them touch it. The documented history of this stone begins in the 17th century, when French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier acquired a large blue diamond in India, almost certainly from the Kalur mine in the Golconda region of what is now Andhra Pradesh. The stone at this point weighed approximately 112 carats in its rough form. Tavernier sold it to King Louis XIV of France in 1668. What happened to Tavernier afterward is the first data point in a sequence. He reportedly died in Russia. Some accounts say attacked by wild dogs. Others say simply old age. The accounts disagree on the manner, but agree he did not thrive after selling the stone. Louis XIV had the diamond recut to 67 carats and called it the blue diamond of the crown. He wore it several times and died of gangrene in 1715. His great-grandson, Louis XV, inherited it and managed to avoid immediate catastrophe, perhaps because he rarely wore it. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette wore it frequently. They were guillotined in 1793. The diamond was stolen during the Revolutionary period and disappeared for nearly 20 years, reappearing in London in 1812 as a smaller stone of 45.52 carats, recut to avoid recognition, now owned by diamond merchant Daniel Eliason. It passed through several hands before being acquired by Henry Philip Hope in 1839, giving it the name it carries today. Hope's family kept it for decades, during which time several family members experienced financial ruin and personal catastrophe. The stone was eventually purchased by American socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean, who wore it as a party piece and considered it good luck. She may have been the most openly defiant owner the diamond ever had. Her son was killed in an automobile accident. Her daughter died of a drug overdose. Her husband was declared insane and committed to an asylum. Her newspaper empire went bankrupt. The jeweler who purchased the diamond after McLean's death died of a heart attack shortly after. The mailman who delivered the package when the diamond was donated to the Smithsonian was, within a year of that delivery, hit by a car, involved in a fire that destroyed his home and lost his wife and son in separate accidents. Now, the rational reading of all of this is that the Hope diamond has been owned by wealthy people across 400 years. And wealthy people in proximity to powerful political events have always had complicated lives. Confirmation bias makes us remember the bad things that happen to owners and forget the good things. The diamond itself is inert. It is carbon. It does not cause disease or direct fate. That is almost certainly true. What is also true is that the diamond originated in a Hindu temple, where the accounts say it served as the eye of a sacred idol, and that the theft of a deity's eye from a sacred space in the Hindu tradition carries specific, documented spiritual consequences according to the theological framework of the culture from which it was taken. That framework is not Western. It does not require you to believe in it, but the people who installed that stone as the eye of a god believed in it deeply enough to build an entire theological structure around the consequences of its removal. And the historical record of that stone, whatever its physical properties, traces a path through human life that the original warning, however encoded, seems to have described accurately. The diamond is behind glass at the Smithsonian. 8 million people see it every year. None of them touch it. Number 7. The Curse of the Pharaohs, the Seti First Inscription. Most people know about Tutankhamun's curse. Far fewer know about the much older, much more explicit, and in some ways far more documented curse inscribed in the tomb of Pharaoh Seti I, who reigned approximately 1294 to 1279 BCE, over 70 years before Tutankhamun was even born. Seti I's tomb in the Valley of the Kings is one of the longest, most elaborately decorated, and architecturally sophisticated royal tombs ever constructed. It descends more than 137 meters into the bedrock of the valley floor and contains astronomical ceilings, painted ritual texts, and inscriptions that took scholars decades to fully translate. Among those inscriptions is one that functions differently from the typical religious texts surrounding it. It reads, in translation that has been verified across multiple Egyptological sources, "As for any man who shall enter this tomb in his impurity, I shall wring his neck like a bird's." The specificity is what is striking. This is not a general invocation of divine displeasure. This is a specific, physical, described consequence. The neck, the bird, the mechanism. It reads less like a religious warning and more like an instruction manual for a consequence the author expected to be real. Giovanni Belzoni, the Italian explorer who first entered Seti I's tomb in 1817, did not die in the tomb. He survived for several more years and died in 1823 of dysentery in Benin while attempting to reach Timbuktu. But the sequence of events between his entry into the tomb and his death is notable for its accumulation of increasingly severe misfortunes, personal financial collapse, failed expeditions, and deteriorating health, in a way that contemporaries remarked upon and attributed, in the language of their era, to his disrespect of the pharaoh's resting place. The more scientifically interesting aspect of Seti I's tomb curse is what researchers found when they analyzed the tomb's sealed inner chambers in the 20th century. Unlike Tutankhamun's tomb, which had been partially robbed in antiquity, Seti I's deeper chambers contained evidence of extraordinarily well-preserved organic material. The conditions inside were, in a very specific biochemical sense, exactly the conditions under which certain extremely dangerous pathogens could remain viable for extended periods. Dr. Ezzedine Taha of Cairo University published research in 1962 demonstrating that 3 of his colleagues who had worked extensively in Egyptian tombs had developed infections consistent with Histoplasma capsulatum, a fungal pathogen that can cause severe and sometimes fatal respiratory illness in immunocompromised individuals. Taha's study, one of the first serious scientific investigations of the curse phenomenon, identified the tomb environment as a vector for genuine biological harm. Taha himself died in a car accident 6 months after publishing his findings. The timing has been noted by scholars who study the curse phenomenon, though the accident itself has conventional explanations. The curse on Seti I's tomb uses the word impurity, which in the original Egyptian context referred not to moral failure, but to ritual uncleanness, a specific state of physical and spiritual preparation required before entering sacred spaces. The ancient Egyptians, whatever else you might say about their cosmology, understood that entering a sealed space in the wrong state could kill you. They built an entire spiritual framework around this understanding. They encoded it as religious law. And they were right, not because of anything supernatural, but because of biology that they could observe and describe, but not explain by any other means available to them. The curse was never supernatural. It was epidemiological, and it was accurate. Number 6. The Curse of the Ninth Legion. In approximately 117 CE, the Ninth Legion of the Roman army, a force of approximately 5,000 soldiers that had served in Britain for decades, marched north into what is now Scotland and was never seen again. No Roman record explains what happened to them. No battlefield has been identified. No mass grave has been found. No survivors appear in any subsequent Roman military roster. They simply ceased to exist. This in itself is not a curse story. It is a military mystery, one of the most persistent in Roman history. Historians have proposed various explanations: destruction in battle, transfer to other theaters of war, disbandment and reassimilation into other units. The debate continues in academic journals to this day. What makes the Ninth Legion relevant to a discussion of ancient curses is what preceded their disappearance. Before their final march north, multiple Roman sources report the legion passed through and desecrated a sacred site near the modern city of York. The specifics vary by source, but the consistent element across accounts is that the soldiers violated a druidic sacred space, destroyed ritual objects, and killed the guardians of the site. The druidic curse that followed, according to accounts preserved in fragmentary Roman documents and later Celtic oral tradition, was specific. The legion would march into the land of the dead and not return. The spirits of those whose sacred space had been violated would consume them. Now strip the supernatural language from that warning. What it describes, in the vocabulary available to the people who issued it, is an ambush. A coordinated military response, prepared in advance, by people with intimate knowledge of the terrain, motivated by genuine grievance, and willing to commit to total destruction of an enemy force. The people who issued that curse were Druids, who were also the military strategists and intelligence networks of Celtic Britain. The curse was both a spiritual declaration and a military briefing. The 9,000 people who knew the terrain, the routes, the weaknesses of Roman armor in narrow passes, the locations of bogs and forests, had just been given every reason to coordinate their most devastating possible response. The 9th Legion walked into a landscape where every native person was now, spiritually and militarily, committed to their complete destruction. Whether the Druids believed in the literal power of their curse, or were using the curse as a mechanism to mobilize a population, the outcome was identical. The Legion never came back. The curse worked. Whether it worked because of supernatural intervention, or because curses, in the hands of people who understand their strategic function, are the most effective mobilization tools ever invented, is a question that only changes the mechanism. The result is the same. 5,000 soldiers. Not one survivor. Not one account. The land swallowed them whole, just as the curse said it would. Number 5. The Curse of Tippecanoe. This one requires no ancient language, no sealed tomb, no dead civilization. It begins in 1811 in the Indiana Territory of the United States, when General William Henry Harrison defeated a confederacy of Native American tribes at the Battle of Tippecanoe and burned their sacred village, Prophetstown, to the ground. The Confederacy had been led by two brothers, Tecumseh, the military genius, and his brother, Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet, who was the spiritual leader of the pan-tribal movement. After the burning of Prophetstown, Tenskwatawa issued what has become one of the most precisely documented curses in American history. He declared that Harrison and every American president elected in a year ending in 0 would die in office, a consequence of the violation of the sacred site and the slaughter of his people. William Henry Harrison was elected president in 1840 and died of pneumonia 31 days after his inauguration. This is the shortest presidency in American history. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860. He was assassinated in 1865. James Garfield was elected in 1880. He was assassinated in 1881. William McKinley was elected in 1900. He was assassinated in 1901. Warren Harding was elected in 1920. He died of a heart attack in 1923 while in office. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected in his third term in 1940. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage in office in 1945. John F. Kennedy was elected in 1960. He was assassinated in 1963. Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. He was shot in an assassination attempt in 1981 and survived. This is the first break in the sequence, and it is the most interesting data point of all, because it requires explanation. George W. Bush was elected in 2000. He survived 2 terms. The sequence broke at Reagan. Historians and statisticians have analyzed Tippecanoe's curse extensively. The rational explanation is that the United States had enough presidents elected in 0 years that random chance, combined with the elevated mortality risks of the 19th century and the specific dangers of public political life, could produce this cluster. Assassination risk was genuinely elevated in periods of high political tension. Age and health considerations explain many of the natural deaths. But here is what that explanation cannot fully address. The curse was issued before the first death occurred. Tenskwatawa specified the 0-year election cycle before Harrison was even president. The prediction was made, recorded by witnesses, and then confirmed across 7 consecutive iterations. That is not the profile of a superstition that evolved to fit the facts. It is the profile of a prediction that was made and then verified. Whatever Tenskwatawa knew or believed about the forces he was invoking, the pattern he predicted was real. It was precise, and it held for 140 years before it broke.